Hello and welcome to Unhacked. I'm Bryan Graf, SVP of Compliance Advisory here at Abacode, and today we're just going to talk generally about cyber attacks. Despite the deluge of news about cyber attacks, about ransomware, their effects, and government response, business response, the average business executive team seems to still be very confused about even the basics of what a cyber attack is, the potential risk to their particular company, the impact, and how to prepare for them and respond to them. And not understanding that basic risk makes it impossible for you to put in a program that helps you mitigate those risks and respond to those impacts. So today we want to just go through the definition of a cyber attack, what it means, the different types of attacks, and how they affect different businesses and how they probably affect you even if you don't realize it at this point. So first, just the definition of what cyber attacks are. So when we talk about cyber attacks, there's a couple different terms that will come up that you'll hear. So what are we talking about when we say a company suffered a data leak? What are we talking about when we say a company suffered a cyber attack, a DDoS attack? If a company was breached, what does that mean? If a company was infected by ransomware, what do all these different things mean? So let's go through each one of those terms right now. So a data leak describes just an accident where sensitive data was exposed externally outside the organization. So this is just an employee, let's say in a healthcare organization, just accidentally emailing a spreadsheet of patient records outside the organization. They weren't supposed to do that. No malicious attacker, it was just an accident. That's still a security incident. There still needs to be a response process to mitigate the impact of the damage that's going to do to your organization, especially if it contains PHI. If you are a company that is ingesting that data, HIPAA, the law that governs the security of PHI data, requires that you have an incident response process in place for data leaks. But most organizations, all organizations, should have some sort of process in place when an accident like that happens, because those accidents are going to happen. The more employees you have, everyone uses email, and accidents are going to occur. You need to be able to respond to it. So that's just a data leak. We haven't even gotten to the attacks yet. A cyber attack is just a broad term that describes any action taken by a malicious attacker to cause a data breach or cause loss of availability of systems. So taking that previous example, instead of an employee just accidentally emailing patient records or some sort of sensitive data, if they receive an email that looks like it's from their supervisor, but it's really a phished email from a malicious attacker saying to send this data or send an invoice or whatever to this email address, then that leak becomes a cyber attack, because it's a malicious attacker, someone attempting to gain access to data or systems. So that's just broad terms, cyber attack. Now, what does it mean when we say a DDoS attack? A DDoS attack is a type of loss of availability attack. So that means a malicious attacker is sending a large amount of data to your external IP addresses in an attempt to bring down your systems. So this is a loss of availability of systems. What does it mean when we say a company was breached? That means that a malicious attacker somehow gained access to data they were not supposed to gain access to. So that initial scenario we're talking about, that is called a data breach, because there's data exposed outside externally, and you need to respond to that. And then finally, what do we mean when we say ransomware lockdown? This is when a malicious attacker was able to infect your systems with ransomware, which encrypts all of your data so that you can't access your systems or your data, and you're basically dead in the water. You can't operate as a business. And what they basically do is hold all that infrastructure hostage until you pay a ransom to get it back. And you can't make any money until that happens. So if you don't understand just these basic security incidents and how to respond to each type, you're always going to be in reactive mode. That's the worst time to learn about ransomware, to learn about security attacks, is when it's happening. You want to make sure that there is a process in place, and you need to understand what that risk is to your organization before you put that plan in place. And now we're going to talk about how do you determine how to prepare for these types of attacks. So the first thing you have to do is identify your organization's critical systems and processes. These attacks are going to affect either your entire company or a certain set of your company. So you need to determine first what those critical components are and their financial impact to your organization. So let's go back to the example of Joe's Medical Group. Let's say they have 10 offices, one flat network, let's say 12 servers, a core switch, third-party web-based ERP. And their total revenue is $20 million a year. This is a simple example. So you have a list of critical systems. Now you need to determine the likelihood of each type of attack occurring to each system. So we can start with the physical office locations. To determine the likelihood of an attack occurring, you have to look at your current security mechanisms. So if you're looking at 2 offices and one of them has no security program in place, they don't have multi-factor authentication, they don't have security monitoring, they don't have security policies and procedures, the likelihood of an attack occurring in that office is much higher than an office that has a security program in place, has monitoring, and it has things like endpoint protection, segmentation, and things like that. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, that Joe's Medical Group does not have any security measures in place, and we've decided that a ransomware attack, there's a probability of 35% of a ransomware attack happening in the next 12 months because there's really nothing to detect or stop it at this point. They're basically just flying. They're basically just rolling the dice right now. So we've decided it's 35% probability of an attack occurring at a single location, and let's say 20% of an attack infecting the entire environment. So what is the impact of that attack? That's a little bit simpler to at least get a ballpark estimate than you might think. So how do we determine that financial impact? Well, we know that total revenue of Joe's Medical Group is $20 million a year, and there's 10 offices. So to make things easy, let's just say each office produces $2 million in revenue a year. We know the average ransomware lockdown takes about 15 to 20 days to recover from, and usually involves the average ransom of $570,000. Because Joe's Medical Group is a smaller organization, we're going to assume the ransom that they're going to have to spend is $200K. So the impact of a ransomware attack on one office in Joe's Medical Group would be $2 million divided by 365, so that 15 days of lost operations plus $200K in ransom. Now, there's also going to be remediation and other costs, but just to keep this simple, we're going to just include these 2 costs. So the potential impact of a lockdown of one office, let's calculate it to about, let's make it easy, $282,000 is the financial impact. So what is the overall risk? Over the next 12 months, if we determine that there's a 35% chance of an attack occurring, and that attack is going to cost $282,000, we're saying for one office to get locked down is $98,700 in financial risk over the next 12 months. Now that is now your baseline. You have to prevent this $98,000 attack from occurring in your organization. Then you want to spend a commiserate amount to prevent that from happening. You don't want to spend $100,000 to prevent that attack. That's detrimental to your organization. So having that initial risk lets you understand, okay, this is how much I'm standing to lose, so I know how much effort I need to put forth in order to stop it from happening, or reduce that likelihood from 35% to 5%, or maybe reduce that impact from $282,000. But if you implement, sturdy incident response and backup restoration processes, maybe you can cut that down to a 10-day recovery period, and maybe you don't have to pay that ransom. So both of the likelihood and the impact, you want to reduce that to the point where you can accept that risk. If something does happen, you're able to mitigate it. Let's say you're still down for a couple of days, but that's something your organization can handle. So that's where you want to get to, what the risk is going to cost and what my mitigation strategy is going to cost, and make sure there's enough of a gap there that it makes sense. So now Joe knows how much money the medical group is going to lose if an attack occurs, what the probability is of that attack. In the next video, we'll go through, now you have that baseline, how do you put together a strategy to reduce, eliminate, or mitigate the impact of that attack? And we'll go through that next week. So once again, this is Unhacked. I'm Bryan Graf, and I will see you next time.